everyone, how are you doing today? Today we're going to review the second palette from the Morphe Vault, the Dark Magic palette. This is a super cool tone palette. It has to be the darkest palette in this collection. When I first looked at it, I thought this would be the last palette I would pick up if I was just picking up individual palettes, because first of all, it's very cool toned. Secondly, it's really dark colored, which means it's going to create more nighttime smoky eye looks. And with two little kids, I rarely get out at night, so I thought I would get the least use out of it. And then also because the most beautiful shade in this palette, which is Trickery according to me, was just frozen up in a tester palette pan. So I don't know if the testers they had there were from the old vault or what, but because of those reasons, I thought this was my least favorite palette, and that's why I chose it to review as my second palette. My opinions on the Bling Boss palette have definitely changed after I looked at the footage, and I will talk more about that in the whole vault review. So make sure you're subscribed and the notification bell is rung so that you'll be notified when that video goes up. For now, let's get into this palette and the eye swatches. As usual, my lids are bare. I don't have any primer on them. Today I'm going to use these three brushes for applying the shades. Mostly I'll use the smudger brush for the shimmers and the other two brushes mostly for mattes. So the first shadow is Poof, and it is a very light beige matte. It is very nicely pigmented and it applied very well. Power Cut is a pretty silvery, almost steel colored shimmer, and it applied very well all over the lid. But I feel like I have this shade in many of my drugstore palettes, so it was nothing new. Shh, or what I feel like calling SHHH. It's a nice cool tone medium brown color. It is nicely pigmented and I thought it blended well. Trickery applied much better than what I had expected in the store, where it had just frozen in the pan. It applied very easily with a smudger brush all over the lid, and it was very even application as well. Trickery was a pain to remove because of its color and pigmentation, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a positive. However, I was a little bit worried going forward with the rest of the swatches from this palette. Diversion is a slightly darker brown version of Power Cut. It's more of my skin tone, so it almost appears like an eyeglass, and all the shimmers in this palette applied very nicely. You'll see towards the end how they apply over mattes when there is no eye primer underneath, because just like my normal eye swatches, I'm not wearing any eye primer here. Potion is a military green shade. This is kind of the only warmer shade in the palette. It applied evenly, but it felt like it was really weak in pigmentation, and I wasn't able to get the shadow to look like it looks in the pan. Busted is a deep peacock blue shade, and it again blended very easily, but it is just weak in pigmentation. No matter how hard I tried to build it up to full opacity to look like it does in the pan, I wasn't able to without an eye primer underneath. Inside Job looks like a very deep green shade in the pan. However, over my lid, it just looks like black. It blended very easily, but it kept on getting patchy. It again is weak in pigmentation. Unless there was an eyeshadow primer underneath, I was not able to get it to look like it did in the pan, no matter how hard I tried. It is funny that all these dark shadows were very hard to apply, but they were also just as hard to take off. Mojo is a dark coffee shade. I was actually really interested in this shade, but again, it is weak. It has to be the weakest shade in the pan, I think, because it just kept on getting patchy and I wasn't able to build it up to look like this beautiful rich coffee color. Temptress is a black with little silver shimmer in it if you look in the pan. However, it is so little that even in the finger swatches, I could barely see it. On my eyes, I could not see it at all. I'm not sure if the shimmer was just there so that it makes blending the black shadow easier. I don't know. This particular black though is nice and pigmented, and I was able to make it pretty opaque even without any eye primer. Alright, so let's get into layering now. Sorry, my camera just was not recording when I first tried to layer. Alright, so I just tried to layer Power Cut on top of Temptress, and now I'm wondering if Temptress ever applied evenly, because when I applied it in the center and then tried to slightly blend the edges, it has blended away Temptress. I'm gonna take Trickery and try applying it in the middle of Mojo. I'm not sure if I'm getting too much of a layering effect, but at least it is not taking off Mojo at the edges when I try to blend it. And finally, I'm going to just add Diversion on top of Mojo on the inner portion of the lid. Let's try it on top of Trickery. So that seems to be working to me. And now I'm just adding some more of Trickery. Trickery and Divergence seem to be blending pretty nicely into each other on top of Mojo. I don't see Mojo being taken off and getting patchy. Or maybe it was patchy to begin with. I don't know. I'm gonna go back, add some more Temptress, and then add Power Cut on top of that. Because now there is Power Cut underneath. Shimmer shadows tend to be more oily, so I'm hoping that it gives Temptress some base to stick on. And then as I add this on top, no. So overall, this is a matte heavy palette. There are 3 shimmers, 6 complete mattes, and then 1 kind of a matte with a little bit of shimmer in it. But when I swatched it over my arm, I could barely see it. Over my lids, I really couldn't. So I don't know what's the deal with that. I really like all the shimmers in this palette. I felt that they looked very wonderful all over the lid, and I was able to layer them well over the matte shadows as long as there was an eye primer underneath. The matte shadows in general I felt were really weak on pigmentation. Poof and Shh were not bad. Shh doesn't look like what it looks in the pan over my lids still. Potion was actually getting muddy when I tried to blend it with Shh, and oh my god, I kept on wanting to call it SHH. Potion I had high hopes from because that was the only warmer shade, and I thought that is what is going to help me kind of warm up my crease, but I was kind of disappointed in it. Busted and Inside Job look really patchy and weak and kind of blend away if there is no eye primer underneath. With eye primer underneath, they look nice. Inside Job looks kind of deep green in the pan. On my lids, it just looks black. Mojo, I just could not get this shadow to show up for me. It did not show up without any eye primer. And then when I tried to add it on the outer corner for this look, it just looks like nothing. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And Temptress is nicely pigmented. The shimmer is not shown. I used it as a liner for this look, but I had fallout from hell. Like, I kept on having to take my makeup off. I did that twice during creating this look. First because of this Busted and Inside Job, because I got a lot of fallout on my under eye area, and then with Temptress I was getting transfers from I don't know where. I think there was like a really fine powder all over the palette which kept on getting transferred to my fingers and then to my face. So that was kind of a disaster and I was very unhappy towards the end. Overall, at first glance, to me it looked like poor man's Subculture, especially because all the rich tones from Subculture, the oranges and the yellows, were missing. And I really did miss them in this palette. For me personally, I really need at least 1 yellow or orange or something to make this palette work. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks again for watching. Stay subscribed and keep the notification bell rung for the future videos. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!